My name is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and I was an only child born of free black parents. My mother passed when I was only 3 years old in 1828, and I was orphaned and raised by my mother's maternal aunt and uncle, the Reverend William Watkins, who was a civil rights activist. And I was educated at his Academy for Negro Youth, and I am proud to say he was a major influence in my life. And at 14, I found work as a seamstress. And in 1845, I had my first volume of verse, Forest Leaves, published, and I was only 20 years old. My second book of poems of miscellaneous subjects was extremely popular in 1854 and was reprinted many times. And in 1859, my story, The Two Offers, was published in Anglo-African magazine, making me the first black woman to publish a short story. And I continue to publish poetry and short stories. I had my first novel, Lola Leroy, in 1892. And I also had Shadows Uplifted published as a book. I dealt with many serious social issues of my time, including education for women, passing, miscegenation, abolition, reconstruction, temperance, and social responsibility. You want to know what made me get involved with the Underground Railroad? Well, in 1850, conditions have deteriorated for free blacks in the slave state of Maryland, forcing my Uncle William to close his school and escape with some of my family members to Canada. And at the age of 25, at that time, I felt I wanted to go out on my own. So I went to Ohio, a free state, to be a teacher. I started teaching domestic science at Union Seminary in Columbus. And in 1852, I took a teaching job in Little York, Pennsylvania. It was there I lived in an underground railroad station. While there, I observed the difficult journeys of slaves towards freedom. This experience led me to my despair for the sufferings of my people under the slave laws. I found myself becoming deeply in tune with the abolition movement. And in 1853, Maryland passed a law decreeing that any free person of color entering the state would be arrested and sold into slavery. When I heard about a young man who had accidentally crossed into Maryland, and under this law, he was brought by a Georgia slaveholder. When the young man escaped, the slave catchers recaptured him and sent him back, where he eventually passed. It was then I wrote a friend pledging on the grave of the young man to the anti-slavery cause and joining the American Anti-Slavery Society. In 1854, through the inspiration of Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author of the Uncle Tom Cabins, my book of poems was published called Books of Miscellaneous Subjects. One of my most famous abolitionist poems, Bury Me in a Free Land, and it went like this. I ask no monument, proud and high, to arrest the gaze of the passerbys. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me, not in a land of slaves. From this and other works, I used my money to send to William Steele, whose home was one of the ones used for the Underground Railroad. I gave him the money for the Vigilantes Committee and the fugitives. William counseled me to keep some of my earnings for myself, but I felt helping humanity was a sacred calling and a blessing. I forged friendships with Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman. As for the Underground Railroad Station, William Steele's home was one of the busiest, and I met many fugitives at his home, hearing hundreds of heart-rending stories. And in conclusion, I believe that blacks could and should help themselves. And I encourage blacks to create schools, newspapers, and churches dedicated to bettering their own community. And I believe that the anti-slavery worked and helped the important goal of teaching black people to build their own souls, intellect, and character.
Michael rowed a boat ashore, hallelujah. Michael rowed a boat ashore, hallelujah. Sister, help to trim the sails, hallelujah. Sister, help to trim the sails, hallelujah.